Lemonheads, this rules. Oh, fuck. I was going to watch that guy, that Hitler guy. The, Darryl Cooper. That's who I was going to watch. Because he went on Tucker. Darryl Cooper, Tucker. Okay, so this is a guy who went on Tucker and he said that Hitler.
The big tech companies censor our content.
Whoopsie.
I hate to tell you that.
Do they? You're very, very successful and rich and popular.
Enough a way that people can actually start taking a more honest look at everything that went on. And it is going to be the most fruitful place that any aspiring historian can dive into, because we've spent the last 70 years, I mean, in Europe's case, like literally throwing people in jail for looking into the wrong corners, right? So there's and even,
so this guy
particularly
says,
in Austria.
Right. And so even in the United
States.
States.
It's an invaded country, so I'm not exactly sure why it's so important.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
it's a big topic, but I mean, even the United States, where you're not going to go to jail necessarily for doing that. You might have your life ruined and lose your job.
You might absolutely go to jail in this country.
Nowadays, you might, yeah.
For what?
But,
whoa,
you know,
whoa, what did
you
I
could
miss?
write a book enough a way that people can talk about, that are going to guarantee that topic is just profoundly misunderstood.
Okay, here we go. Here we go.
That we're all living in at this
you
time,
know what
right?
they're
Those other
talking
things are.
about.
Whenever you have a historical event that is mythologized, and when I say that, I don't mean myth like that's a myth, that's a lie. That's not what I mean. I mean that it's a formative part of how we all understand the world we're in, or at least officially, the official world.
Spit it out.
The structures we live in.
Spit it out.
It's the justification for a lot of those structures, right? Whenever you have those things, you're going to have taboos. You're going to have certain ways that certain topics have to be talked about that are going to guarantee that topic is just profoundly misunderstood. And I told the students at the University of Vienna, I said, over the next couple decades, like, we're going to get to a point where the interwar period and the Second World War are far enough away that people can actually start taking a more honest look at everything that went on. And it is going to be the most fruitful place that any aspiring historian can dive into, because we've spent the last 70 years, I mean, in Europe's case, like literally throwing people in jail for looking into the wrong corners, right? So there's and even
particularly in Austria.
Right. And so even in the United States.
It was an invaded country, so I'm not exactly sure why it's so important.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
it's a big topic, but I mean, even the United States, where
Here we
you're not going to go to jail necessarily for doing that. You might have your life ruined and lose your job.
You might absolutely go to jail in this country.
Nowadays, you might, yeah. But, you know, you could write a book. You could take any angle on it you want. You're not going to ever get a job or have a publisher want to publish it or anything, but you could do it. You can go out on the street corner and stand on a box and say whatever it is you think. But even still,
what is it you think?
You know, that event
what
is really it's such a core part of the state religion that there are emotional triggers built into people since childhood that almost prevent them from taking an approach that that might lead them to information or to conclusions that are not part of the state religion's version of
the
that
approach?
event. You know, and again, you're going to find that. I'm sure the Peloponnesian Wars were like that for the ancient Greeks.
Well, that's right. Well, by the way, the American Revolution, which is now totally irrelevant to modern America, unfortunately, was like that. The life of Lincoln was like that. Lincoln was an very complicated guy. It's not an endorsement of slavery. Well, speaking for myself, I think slavery is disgusting. It's the worst thing. What you're saying is absolutely right. It's not just the Second World War that is sort of uniquely censored or protected. The mythology around it, it's every event that's central to a nation's understanding of itself, and then that changes over time. So do you think that we are far enough away 80 years from that war where you can try to take this an object?
Was disgusting. You just said slavery was disgusting. Let's unpackage that for a second and think about that, right? Disgusting, like something you'd send back at a restaurant? Right. And when you take the food and you send it back at a restaurant because it's disgusting, it doesn't meet your standard, who does it? Right. an employee of a company, someone who's sort of like an indentured kind of servant, right? Okay, right. Okay, so the thing, but you're more disgusted by the food than the person who is enslaved to the system that has to. Right. Okay, so let's rewind a little bit, and let me actually. Are you familiar with the Rosicrucians?
If you can, and that will be allowed.
No, I don't. I think we've got a little ways to go on that, but I hope I can kind of start to break the ice a little bit, because like here's the problem with doing something like that. And this is something I'm very aware of as I research it and start to work on the project, is that when you have a mythologized historical event that is told, that is, again, you go to a lot of places in Europe, it's a legal requirement. Over here, it's not quite that, but it almost might as well be where that this event is going to be described from a certain perspective. You're going to approach it a certain way. There are just certain things you're not allowed to question. You have to...
Literally, it's a crime to ask questions.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, which is what I've done my whole life. That's a crime.
When you try to add any type of balance to that account, when you try to tell the story in a way that brings other approaches and other perspectives into it, it's going to look like you're trying to justify those other things. That's just how it's going to seem to people who are very locked into this side. And so if you start talking about the interwar period and how the Weimar culture, after the First World War, led to something like the rise of the National Socialists, and why the people who embraced that movement did embrace it in a way that's not just, was because they were, you had this country, Germany, a sophisticated cultural, superpower that was fine, and then they all turned into demons for a few years, and now they're fine again. Like, that's sort of the official story. And I think deep down we all know that makes no sense. Everything has a cause. Again, to go back, like Uday Hussein got to be Uday Hussein from that 3-year-old little kid. Jim Jones got to be Jim Jones from being that guy who was just an earnest local Indianapolis civil rights activist. They all got to be those people that led to the chaos that they eventually invited into the world and onto themselves and their people through their experiences in the world, and through a series of decision points that at the time, if you can bring yourself to step into the shoes of those people, it's not a comfortable thing to do. When I literally listened to probably 2,000 hours of Jim Jones's sermons and him screaming at his people and just going insane, to the point where I was dreaming about this guy for months. I would have my headphones in as I was working, listening to Jim Jones. And it's really hard. Yeah, I know.
Were you the only guy in the office doing that?
I think I'm probably the only person in the world that's done that. And so, and I got to the point where I felt like I knew this guy. I could notice from tape to tape.
He was the first
changes in his tone of voice,
podcast
and I
listener.
knew whether he was.
He was a podcast. He's a Patreon subscriber of Jim Jones,
or if he had taken his barbiturates already, and now you could just. I felt like I knew this guy. And their tapes, by the way, they're not all from 1 year. They're from 15, 20 years, right? So you can watch this process of of a descent into madness as it's happening. And to get to a point where you can bring yourself to step into the shoes of any other human being and understand that as much as it makes you uncomfortable, it is just a human being. And at the very, very base level, their motivations are the same as yours, their needs are the same as yours. But that we're a multivariate species that can go a lot of different directions, right? And to be able to do that and force yourself to do it is the key. And so when you do something like that with, again, like a historical event like World War II, where, the one rule is that you shall not do that. You shall not look at this topic and try to understand how the Germans saw the world. Like how the whole thing, from the First World War on up to the very end of the war, how these people might have genuinely felt like they were the ones under attack, that they were the ones being victimized by their neighbors and by all these by the Allied powers. And you can handle that with a sentence. You can wave it off and say, well, they're justifying themselves, or they're rationalizing their evil, or whatever you want to say. But again, I think we're getting to the point where that's very unsatisfying for people.
Most of us, well, actually all of us, go through our daily lives using all sorts of, quote, free technology without paying attention to why it's, quote, free. Who's paying for this and how?
Who's paying for this?
Think about it.
It's on my wife's
credit card.
Think about your
free email
it's
account.
It's black.com. She lets me watch it. It's so funny to an ad break right there where he's like, But no one ever thinks about World War II from the point of view of the National Socialist Party. This guy kicks so much ass. He's so awesome.
System that they made is called Messenger and other apps that help you take charge of your personal data and prevent it from getting passed around to data brokers and government agencies that will use it to manipulate you. Unplug's commitment is to its customers. They will promise you, and they mean it, that your data are not being sold or monetized or shared with anyone. From basics like its custom Libertas op on your device off the power, it actually disconnects your battery. What's a fact? Tech. So go to unplug.com/Tucker to get yours today. Highly recommended. It's more than unsatisfying. I mean, it's childish and shallow, of course.
Hold on. Sorry to interrupt, but that's true. But every society has founding myths.
100%.
And you need them. You know, like, I don't think that we're necessarily better off.
We're going full screen for this guy right here.
Now that people
or is that bad? Is it bad if I go
able
full
to just
screen
freely tear down a statue of George Washington because he was a slave owner, right?
Agree.
And so, like, there are sacred
and then we get into him talking about Churchill.
National myths that any group of people are going to need to hold themselves together.
Myths.
And there's also peril in knowing the truth about things.
He's talking about the National
when we
Socialist
finally
Party,
find out
here we
how
go.
President Kennedy was murdered in 1962. We finally find out what all these weird lights in the sky are at night. We really get to the truth of that. Will we be better off or not? I mean, those are fair questions. I don't know the answer. But let me just say what I completely agree with you. Any unifying myth, is important. I'm just highly distressed by the uses to which the myths about World War II have been put
here we go.
in the context of modern foreign policy.
This is getting real
particularly
hot.
the war in Ukraine.
Real exciting.
And but not just the war in Ukraine, so many others,
See, they're
Churchill's
doing
the good guy,
it's a Tinder
Neville Chamberlain's
dance. The
bad
way they're
guy.
dancing around it right now.
It's too
This is how professionals do it.
Obviously quite banal. But it also has justified like the killing of millions of people since the end of the Second World War. And so I do think it's fair to ask like what really was going on. So for example, and I'm American, I'm not English, so I don't have any weird motive in asking this, but how would you assess Winston Churchill?
I got in trouble with my podcast partner, Jocko Willink, one time because he's a New England
He does a podcast
Dutchman.
with Jocko?
His family, it's near and dear to they're Dutch, but very near and dear to their heart that Winston Churchill is a hero, right?
Well, everyone
thinks that. He really thinks that. And I told him that I think, and maybe I'm being a little hyperbolic, maybe, but I told him, maybe trying to provoke him a little bit, that I thought Churchill was the chief villain of the Second World War. Now, he didn't kill the most people. He didn't commit the most atrocities. But I believe, and I think when you really get into it and tell the story right and don't leave anything out, you see that he was primarily responsible for that war becoming what it did, becoming something other than an invasion of Poland. Or just, at every step of the way, like people are very often.
We need to get this guy on Lemon Party ASAP and let him explain himself.
Well,
this is
why don't
unbelievable.
you make the case for that? Okay, so you've made your statement. A lot of people are thinking, well, wait a second. You said Churchill, my childhood hero, the guy with the cigar.
Yeah. Well, and the next thought that comes into their head is that, you're saying Churchill was the chief villain, therefore his enemies, Adolf Hitler and so forth, were
Stalin,
the protagonists, right?
Yeah.
That they're the good guys if you think he's a villain. That's not the case. That's not what I'm saying. Germany, look, they put themselves into a position, and Adolf Hitler is chiefly responsible for this, but his whole regime is responsible for it, that when they went into the East in 1941, they launched a war where they were completely unprepared to deal with the millions and millions of prisoners of war, of local political prisoners and so forth that they were going to have to handle. They went in with no plan for that.
It's
and
unbelievable.
They just threw these people into camps, and millions of people ended up dead there. You have like
millions. You did say millions.
As early as July, August 1941. From commandants of these makeshift camps that they're setting up for these millions of people who are surrendering or people they're rounding up.
What people?
And so it's 2 months after, a month or two after Barbarossa was launched. And they're writing back to the high command in Berlin saying, we can't feed these people. We don't have the food to feed these people. And one of them actually says, rather than wait for them all to slowly starve this winter, wouldn't it be more humane to just finish them off quickly now? And so this is like 2 months into the invasion, right? And like my view on this, you know, I argue with my Zionist interlocutors about this all the time with regard to the current war in Gaza. Look, man, like maybe you, as the Germans, you felt like you had to invade to the east. Maybe you thought that Stalin was such a threat, or that if he launched a surprise attack and seized the oil fields in Romania, that you would now not have the fuel to actually respond, and you'd be crippled, and all of Europe would be under threat, and whatever it was, it was that like maybe you thought you had to do that, but at the end of the day, you launched that war with no plan to care for the millions and millions of civilians and prisoners of war that were going to come under your control, and millions of people died because of that, right? And you can look at it and say like, you know, well, yeah. So get back to your main question about Churchill. You know, if you go,
it's better than I thought.
When the Germans and the Soviet Union invade Poland, as soon as that war's wrapped up on the German side, Hitler starts firing off peace proposals to Britain and France because they had already declared war. He didn't expect them to declare war, actually. Like there's a famous scene where he kind of throws a fit.
Dylan Farnham with the 5 says, IDK, if you'll find it interesting, but I'm making a vid on my time as a skinhead, jail, almost marrying a Haitian girl, and tutoring a Sudan lost boy. Yes, I will find it very, very interesting, Dylan.
When he finds out that they actually
I'm waiting with bated breath.
That. And so he doesn't want to fight France. He doesn't want to fight Britain. Feels that's going to weaken Europe when we've got this huge threat to the east, the communist threat over there. And he starts firing off peace proposals. He says, let's not do this. Like, we can't do this.
Unbelievable.
And of course, year goes by.
Folks, I need to go.